Greetings and salutations, all you beautiful individuals. It is another episode of League Unlocked, and Mark here with you, a fine set of individuals for a long trip way back in time. This is a boomer-filled episode, part one of part two. We are going through the climactic rise and fall of a little itty-bitty known North American team called Team Solo Mid. We're going back to the beginnings of how this organization quickly ascended to being the most iconic team in North America before completely falling off the face of the earth and no longer even existing. It is a story full of highs and some of the deepest lows in esports.
It's a story that I don't think is replicated amongst esports or even traditional sports, to have an organization explode onto the scene and capture so many fans and become such an iconic part of the league and part of the sport and everything else. And to fumble it, tumble it, bumble it all the way down the way that TSM is now, where we've gone 2 whole years. Yep, check that, 2 whole years and counting without TSM playing in the League of Legends sphere. Let's take a trip down memory lane, because it's not all bad. There are some fun and interesting spots and some good historic things to look back on through the history of the LCS LTA at the time, and of course, Team Solo Mid.
And, you know, the first half of their existence is mostly good times and good vibes, success, the massive fan base, but we got to go back. We're talking 2009. This is like the beta for League of Legends. We don't even have the official release. This whole thing started as solomid.net. Before you had the mobalytics of the world, it was Reggie and his brother just writing guides on how to play League of Legends. And the guides back then, I imagine, were basically get good, bro. Like, that's probably what the extent of these guides were, but that's where the name came from. And then it eventually became a team, primarily because Reggie wanted to make a team to rival his buddy Hotshot GG, who had just started a little-known brand called Counter Logic Gaming.
Oh, the earliest of early days of the LCS. Yes, all the way back in time in the early 2000s internet days of solomid.net. Yes, Reginald and his brother running that blog, putting up the builds, the guides. Again, remember, it's going to be turning back that clock a long bit. We had very different runes and selection system way back in the day compared to where it is now. So
the game was ugly. The map was ugly.
Guides were very much necessary, I think, more so than anything that's come through in the Blitz GG mobalytics type of era of where you're going through and hyper prioritizing these builds. Very different scene. And so that was something that came through. And yes, trying to rival Hotshot, bring in another organization into League of Legends and assemble this squad that came through with the Odd One and everyone else. Oh man, what a time to flash back to.
Yeah, and the first iteration of this roster, we're talking Saint Vicious and Loco Doco were alongside Reggie, Chaox, and the Odd One. And then as we finally got the official release for the game, League of Legends 1.0 Season 1, that's when you had Xpecial come in, and a real big throwback is the Rain Man coming in, he was the full embodiment of the baylife mentality that the boys had. And we're getting like pre-Twitch, guys. This is like for the real throwbacks to owned.net before Twitch was even around, where the Rain Man was one of the most popular streamers.
Own.net, Justin.tv, these of old sites you're going back to check out these streams, check out the footage from these guys. And of course, breathing into the whole scene that would come through as far as house tours, the YouTube channel, that type of side of thing. Really, the earliest days of TSM. Of course, you can talk about the League of Legends side. It was actually more interesting to focus on how they exploded marketing themselves and became a household name throughout their content, throughout this behind-the-scenes look into the lives of these professional gamers.
Yeah, and obviously Game Crib's the first establishment of that, which completely set the precedent for not just house tours, but the inner workings of the drama and behind the scenes for these teams. Having a gaming house at the time was even unheard of for these squads. TSM was the first one to do it, and at that inaugural World Championship Season 1 that Fnatic ended up winning, remember, no Korean teams at this event. So immediately, that's why there's a huge asterisk by this one, but they finished third. They lost 2 times in a row to Against All Authority. So even from the very beginnings, the NA versus EU rivalry hasn't been kind to NA.
No, an early 0-1 in the hole for North America in that respect with Team Solo Mid. But not necessarily, I think, would be the most disappointing of performances at that event. Not the biggest of favorites, but certainly someone that you would have expected to be competing and to throw down at that type of tier for them. The other factor, looking back on this one, what is that I see? Oh, that's C9 Jack as the general manager for TSM back in the early days. And crazy to think of, again, the rivalry that will come to be that we get to talk about with TSM and C9 later. And here he is, being the general manager of TSM at the early days.
The first 2 seasons of League, we got to remember, the LCS as a existence wasn't even a thing. There was still NA regions, European regions, but they didn't have this weekly schedule or league that we were talking about. As we pivot into Season 2, this is when Dyrus comes in to replace the Rain Man, and you start really getting this iconic TSM lineup, and this is when they started winning. IPLs, MLGs, they were not just the best team in North America, but because the game was so young, the international scene was completely not developed. They were one of the best teams in the world, losing in finals to Moscow 5, beating some Korean teams. They go to the World Championship, and they proceed to get swept. Only 2-0, wasn't best of 5s yet, to Azubu Frost. And if you really remember this series, this is the one where Azubu ended up getting fined because Woong, during a pause, was creeping, looking up at the Jumbotron, seeing where Dyrus and the boys were at level 1, and that's got to be why they don't put a massive screen right beside the players at live events anymore.
Has to be. It's one of the things where I know we've done that, and again, especially that old era of how the events were going, that's how it was shown, and stage setup and preparation maybe didn't account for some wandering eyeballs, let's just call it that, from Abuzu Frost. Not the reason why TSM ended up losing that series, I think, is the real way to go through about it, but understandably not happy about that whole situation. But yes, this is the year that Dyrus comes into the team and becomes one of these main focus points of the fandom within the league scene and within TSM fans. Again, going back to that house videos and cribs and everything like that, almost burning down the house with a microwave, toaster, whatever it's going to be. These were the times that, again, built up that fandom for TSM.
And I think having these content videos really, of course, opened up the personalities for these players. It seems like it was such early days, things were less regimented. You really got to see what these players were actually like, got a peek in, a view into what their day-to-day was. And their day-to-day was kind of ridiculous in these old gaming houses in terms of how the lifestyle that these guys lived. This is well before teams had mental coaches or had regiments. We've got to do this workout, we have a chef. This was Dyrus burning things in the microwave, guys staying up till 3 a.m. like their friends just playing games.
It was just dudes hanging out in a house. It just so happened that we are all working on this, video game, eSports type of career. Yes, no chefs, no trainers, no managing anything else in that type of regards for these gaming houses. You saw that through all these tours. And part of that authenticity that comes through from just being these young guys that like playing video games, that are talented at it, that have all sorts of, social issues and little things like that are obviously very relatable to so many people that are watching and following along with these games. It really was that type of path into it. And especially, again, TSM with that effort baylife attitude that they brought to it, very popular at the time.
And we entered then, they were the most popular team when we did enter the LCS era in Season 3, which if you haven't seen the teaser video for Season 3 LCS, it's one of the most cringe esports videos of all time, and you should absolutely go check it out. But we do enter that LCS era. It's still Reggie there in the mid lane for the inaugural split that TSM does end up winning, as you alluded to. Jack was the GM for them before Cloud9 comes onto the scene in summer and beats up on TSM in those summer finals. But the real drama in the first split, the personalities that you got on Game Cribs was great, but I think the reason it's so popular is you saw drama like Chaos getting benched, and there were no filters. They just straight up show Reggie telling Chaos he's benched in front of a camera.
And to add on to it, I don't think Reginald is necessarily someone that holds back or is putting things in the best frame of way. We're gonna run into this issue many times, of course, through the story of Team Solo Mid, unfortunately. But yeah, it was that insight into it, and I think obviously taken a little bit differently at the time compared to now, and with hindsight, looking back on a lot of these incidents. But it was just that fresh reality TV type of sense of dosage and shock value that was coming through, being able to see so much behind the scenes, so much that it should be so close to the team, and to get these moments. Again, it was one of those ones where either love it or hate it. It didn't matter. It drew you into the story of TSM, of this organization, and put you within that gravitational pull of watching the matches.
And, obviously the off-the-riff drama, Chaos, maybe not taking practice seriously, trying to find some girls, the typical esports thing for that time of year. But then Wild Turtle comes in, and then you start getting these actual iconic lineups. He gets his pentakill in his first game. Obviously, we all know that history, and despite them losing to Cloud9 in those summer finals, they still go to Worlds. Don't get out of groups, of course, but put up a decent enough showing, especially Wild Turtle and Chaos. And we get some great clips of seeing Reggie get absolutely bodied by Faker. It's great that we have those in the history books.
You just tuck those one into a saved YouTube playlist for old times, for a dark and rainy day. Got a little bit of some extra sunlight, seeing the GOAT take down Reginald in the way that he did. Yes, at this one's not necessarily very embarrassing, and especially when we get to the list of embarrassing moments for TSM, I don't think
really low on the bar
is really touching it compared to some of the other bad moments on it. But this was really, I think, the importance of this year is picking up Wild Turtle, and you'll see this kind of in the early stages of TSM, despite the success, despite the meteoric rise as far as popularity and interest within the team, and the results starting to pick up as well. It really, in these early years, is about picking up the pieces that eventually lead them to becoming a juggernaut within the early years of the LCS.
And that transition to becoming a juggernaut begins when Reggie steps away from playing, becomes the full-time GM, president, CEO, whatever title you want to throw his way. But of course, that is when the Burger King comes over. I know he wasn't the first EU import to NA. I think Edward was technically the first one, but you can look at Bjergsen as the guy who kind of changed the game in terms of imports coming over, and this is when the TSM branding absolutely skyrockets, because Bjergsen immediately comes in, wins MVP, is the consensus best player in the league, very humble, and you have these personalities surrounded around him. And then even beyond League of Legends, this is when TSM starts branching into other esports. This is when Hearthstone was very popular. Mr. Kriparian started under TSM. Trump SC, no, not that Trump, we're going way back for Hearthstone, but you saw that this ecosystem, this sphere of influence for TSM got even bigger as soon as Bjergsen joined.
Which I think is kind of one of the craziest things to look back on and realize and recognize this moment is not only a significant and mega milestone one for TSM and their history. I think this is a history for Western League of Legends at this point, having Bjergsen come over and then the career that he ends up having, becoming the iconic player that he is, was so important as an import player at the time. And I think, regardless, you look at it, I don't think there has been a more impactful import within the LTA, LCS type of history when you go back and see what he was able to do, how he was able to accomplish it. This is all the early era type of stuff. We're seeing some Cassiopeia. You're seeing the Zed action, I think, come through in these early type of eras for Bjergsen, and you're seeing him dominate out there on a Rift, a way that we didn't see in the LCS at the time. We didn't see from Reginald in the mid lane for Team Solo Mid. This was the solo mid that you wanted, is this young Burger King.
Yeah, and obviously this is remember when Assassins were actually meta in the mid lane and guys could pop off and completely single-handedly carry games? We got that time and time again out of Bjergsen. Even though he won MVP in that first split, they still lost to Cloud9 in the finals. It took until summer for them to capture Bjergsen's first LCS title, the second for TSM as a whole, and of course they go off to Worlds and can you believe it? They make quarterfinals in 2014 before they lose to Samsung White. And that's it. That's the only time Team Solo Mid gets out of groups. Imagine in 2014 saying this is the only time this organization will ever make top 8 at Worlds.
You'd feel really bad about it then, given kind of the hype, the potential, the prospect, all about it. And then I would tell you exactly how things played out, the opportunities, the successes that you did have ultimately capped with failure after failure after failure. Yeah, you would be incredibly shocked. You'd be disheveled, whatever. You'd say, I'm leaving League of Legends. I'm picking up Valorant, whatever. Screw this. Because that's how crazy it is to think back on this type of one. But yes, this is the only time they do break through in this moment. And it's a very short breakthrough for TSM.
And remember, there's going to be a lot of different rosters to go through as we go through the history of TSM. 2014 is when Amazing came in as the jungler to replace Odd One, and Lucina, Lustboy, comes in as the starting support. And again, they win that summer title, get out of groups at Worlds. And the only change heading into the Season 5 split was Santorin comes in as the jungle. Everybody else remains the same, and we see the brand of TSM continue to grow. They pick up a CSGO team who capture a couple international titles. Leffen joins the squad as one of the most iconic Smash players, so you see it growing, the Team Solo Mid brand, and they keep winning. They win IEM Katowice, their first international event, but the stigma of international competition continues to, of course, follow TSM around.
It's not far away from another failure, another disappointment on the international stage, despite the success at IEM Katowice. That was an important one and really kind of a strange little gem for the LCS, LTA, looking back in our history and going back to that one and that single moment. But it doesn't go anywhere because you get to MSI, and who'd we run in at MSI? Oh, that's a familiar face we'll see in a little bit. Huni on Fnatic, running around and being a terror to TSM, and frankly, a lot of other teams at this event as well.
Yeah, and unfortunately, these are iconic moments that did happen in 2015. The Cassiopeia top lane for Huni, absolutely pumping Dyrus, is absolutely one of them. Then you have the infamous Loco Doko and Reggie reaction to the group draw at Worlds. They think they're in an easy-looking Group C, but they end up going into the Group of D for death and proceed to go 1-5, finish last place. At least that was an actual proper Group of death with LGD, KT, and Origin, but going 1-5 never looks good.
No, and it's especially the way that it happened for TSM, right? We have the initial week where it is still obviously very tough up a hill battle type of thing, but you got to win. You have something to hang on to, something that can make things interesting heading into that second week of the event. Until you go 0-3 in that week 2, the classic NA week 2 at these events. If you're new to League of Legends, you might not know about that old thing because it kind of has changed given our play style and the formats that have gone into our international events. But yes, week 2 was a historic and classic struggle for North America, and TSM very much so a perpetrator of that issue and ritual for North America.
Yeah, I think the LCS was probably at the forefront of saying, hey, Paparito, can we get a format change so that we can lose this week 2 debuff? Because yes, in the new era of Worlds, you don't have to worry about that, but they very much did worry about that in 2015, but, you know, we had to keep some of the good years for part 2. That, of course, being the double lift era, which we'll dive into for the second part of things. But summing up the first, 2009 to end of 2015, far and away the takeaway for TSM is this is the most iconic team in North America, has the biggest fan base. You would hear TSM chants at every international event, even if TSM wasn't there. And at this point, they weren't ironic. It was like, we want TSM. When does TSM play? There's a reason these memes have stuck around.
It really is. It's refreshing to actually go back and relive some of these early years for TSM and some of the successes, because, again, a lot of the drama, unfortunate and frustrating things of the downfall that we will talk about are going to be coming, but it doesn't have that type of effect. It isn't a significant downfall if you don't have so high to fall. And that is where going over just what an organizational juggernaut TSM was in the early era of League of Legends in North America and abroad at that point really is something that does need to be recognized and case studied and everything else, because man, oh man, this water slide that we're going on right now, heading towards the bottom into the uncharted territories of where we are now, it's going to be one hell of a ride, folks.
And the beginnings of the toxicity out of Reggie that you see at Game Cribs, talking to either teammates or his players when he's coach, CEO, whatever title you want to have, the meddling that he would consistently do. For all that, you still have to give credit for the Bjergsen signing, taking the risk, bringing him over, because, again, imports weren't a thing. Bjergsen basically had half a year or one split on NIP or Copenhagen Wolves, and you could see the talent, no question. Everyone knew he was a young talent, but taking the risk to bring him over, put all your eggs in his basket, remains the best decision that Reggie has made in his career.
Unquestionably, it's the best decision that he made in his career to not only bring Bjergsen and bet on him in that situation, but also to recognize, okay, I need to actually step out. I need to step away type of thing, take someone else into this position. For lots of reasons, that was the best move and probably the reason why you were able to get some type of success from TSM. The problem looking back on so much of this and the building up to becoming this juggernaut is you look back on it and you see, you know what? I'm seeing a bridge over this river, but I'm seeing some shaky screws holding in a couple of these wood pieces that are, and that's a couple of these moments on Game Cribs, the toxicity with Reginald. Obviously, not a very good look right now.
It's easy to say Bjergsen was the best decision. The worst decision Reggie made, well, that's a lot harder to pick because there's a lot more options to choose from, which we will get to in part 2. But that is it today for League Unlock. Eric and Mark here with you. Absolute beauties. Thanks for hanging out. We'll catch you on that flippity flip.